Hey, welcome to Software Sales Simplified, Move to Success, the podcast for software sales professionals who want to sell better. Every week, we're going to break down what it's like to be an enterprise software sales professional, some of the challenges you face, as well as techniques and tools you can use to improve your sales results. So, being the first podcast of the year, I think a couple things are in order. One, we have big news to announce, and that our book, Winning Faster, the Move Framework, has hit number one on a couple Amazon lists. So we're really excited about that. We had a little celebration about that, but that's, we can now say we're best-selling authors. But anyway, for all those of you who purchased, our hard copy or electronic versions of our book, thank you so much. We really do appreciate that, and we're looking forward to just expanding the knowledge and the exposure to our framework this coming year. So, anything you'd like to share about that, Kevin? I know.
Definitely very excited about the response we've gotten from the book. It's been very inspirational, not only to validate the message we're trying to bring to the market, but also inspiring us to the additional new material that we were talking about in our prior podcast that we're going to be bringing out over the course of the year. So a nice nod to us and an incentive for us to continue moving forward.
Absolutely. And for those of you that don't know who we are, just a quick introduction. My name's Matt Long. I'm 25 years in enterprise software sales, working mostly for large enterprise software companies and selling to other businesses. And my partner in crime here, Kevin Donville, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yep, Kevin Donville, also in the industry for over 25 years, been working as a professional salesperson and as a pre-sales person, also been a leader for the sales teams, pre-sales teams, and services delivery teams.
Perfect. So I thought, since this is our first podcast of the year, and we just did have the big momentous event with our book, that we would just start with what our book is for the people that don't know, and maybe start covering just the very beginnings of it, the foundation about how you get started. I thought would be a good topic for today. So what I'm going to do is just tell you the book is called Winning Faster, the Move Framework for Enterprise Sales Success. And what MOVE stands for is an acronym that is for motive, opportunity, value, and engagement. Right? These are the four pillars that really make up the framework for when you're identifying and categorizing and organizing all the information you have during an enterprise sales campaign. Another way to think about this, though, for motive, it's really the question you're trying to answer is, why do anything? Why would the customer do anything at all, right? So this is really uncovering all of their motivations and needs, etc., that are causing them to do anything from what they're doing currently. Opportunity really answers the question is, can they act? Can they do anything? Often we come across people or customers that are really motivated to do something, but just because of how they're constructed internally, it's just difficult for them to actually execute on that. And these are very important things to understand as well. Sometimes you can even help them overcome those things if you know them in advance. So part of our job as sellers, I found, Kevin, was always not only helping understand on our side what's going on, but helping them understand where the potential pitfalls are. And because we've had experience selling to multiple organizations, we can kind of anticipate some of these things and bring them up for them. So that's something we'll certainly discuss in a later podcast as well. Mm-hmm. Value is about what is the impact to the business. And this is really where you start constructing all the information you gathered, putting it into compelling business cases and narratives that you could then continue to articulate over and over through the course of the sales cycle. And then finally, engagement is how you actually apply this knowledge to your presentations, your demos, your follow-ups, POCs. All this information is going to help construct that and deliver that much better. Mm-hmm. So with that being said, I thought we'd start with motive, because that is the beginning. And if we think about this, with the motive, really, usually your first encounter with the customer is your discovery call. They've reached out, you've created a call. So I'm just curious, Kevin, are there specific questions that you like to lead with at the very first discovery call that are helpful for you? And if so, what are those?
Well, it's a good question. And it's interesting how a lot of salespeople struggle with this. Like when you ask them, so what are the first things you're going to ask? they have a tendency to immediately jump the gun and get to stuff that's far too detailed rather than starting at a high level and working their way down. I always start with the question, why did you invite us in here today? What was it about our solution that you were compelled or interested in finding out about? Because that's a great place to start. Let them tell you. They clearly called you for a reason. You're in that room for a purpose. Ask them what that is and find out what their intentions are from that perspective, and cut to the chase. And that could be a great launching off point for the additional questions you're going to ask subsequent to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that simple question is like, well, what did you want to get out of this? What value did you see, et cetera?
Mhm.
And sometimes, maybe we did the outreach, right? And so, but there was something compelling that caused them to take time out of their busy schedule to talk to us.
Mhm.
So absolutely getting that information and just hearing it from their mouth and their voice is really helpful, because I don't like to assume anything. Even if it was stated before, I like restating it just to say, I heard in the first session, or when we were arranging this thing, that this was important to you. Is that correct? And is that still important? Just constantly just reevaluating that. Not only does it show that you've listened and
Mhm.
heard from before, but also are accounting for things changing during the last time you talked. Not assuming that they're going to have the same goals or things or even memory of what you said in the last conversation.
Yeah, it's also a valuable thing to do in the event that there may be somebody in that meeting who's new and has
Mm-hmm.
not had an opportunity to share what their perspective is. So it's a great opportunity to reset where everybody is and what our understanding is of what the purpose is of this project that they're calling you in on, or whatever initiative it is that they have. And there's a need to always be validating as you're going through the sales cycle, challenging what you think you know, challenging what they've said, and looking for inconsistencies, looking for things that have changed, looking for things that may no longer be aligned, because things do change over the course of the sales cycle. And so that's a great thing to do as you're coming in, particularly if there are new players to the story that are coming in on a fairly regular basis. They get an opportunity to hear what that is, so they understand what the kind of shared expectation is of everybody that's participating at that point. And they also have an opportunity, an invitation, if you will, to share their perspective at that time and add their color, their flavor, their additional elements, needs, and intentions to the conversation.
Yeah, and I think coming in with, a good set of questions and kind of a path that you want to go in terms of uncovering things is really important. But realizing that you're not there to interrogate them and pepper them with 20 questions, right? Which I've seen, which
Mm-hmm.
generally does not go over well, right? They'll start clamming up after about the third or fourth one. So there really is an art to this, and it's about discussion, etc. But when you're thinking about the myriad of questions that you could potentially ask on the first call, I think one of the things that we've defined in our book, in the framework, is starting with a business case and trying to understand the business case is really critical, because what that does is allows you to explore very key areas that are going to help you construct your strategy and campaign and the reasons that they're going to continue working with you.
Mm-hmm.
So with that in mind, I know that we have about 4 different things that we focus on for a business case. And maybe, Kevin, you can go over what those are and we can talk about those for a little bit.
Yeah. So when I start asking questions, and to your point, you can't sit there and ask a million questions. And there are tactics you can get around that you can employ. And we go into some of those in the book, and we'll talk about more of these in the podcast to buy extra questions, if you will, over the
Mhm.
course of your interaction with the customer at that time. So the 4 things we're usually looking for, I mean, at a high level, is we want to understand what the proposal, what's the initiative, what's the reason we're there. There should be something going on that they're looking to us to either support or to improve. What is that? And let's start understanding what that is. The second thing that we want to understand is, why are you doing that? And that's usually where you start going into and exploring the business, operational, and personal pains that are germane to the people who are leading that initiative, because those are the drivers. Those are the things that are kind of inspiring them to engage with this initiative in the first place.
It could be their aspirational goals, right? And things like that as well. But I think 9 times out of 10, most people are motivated out of pain and fear and a problem,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
So it's nice that it's like, yes, we want to be a more efficient organization and, and establish these best practices and all this stuff, right?
Hmm.
I mean, that's aspirational. That's always great. But the deeper drivers really are what is the pain this is facing? Because if we don't, guess what? I'm going to get fired. Not to the extreme, but something like that is really what you want to uncover because that usually is what's motivating them to actually do anything.
Well, those, funny you would say that because those pains and the aspirational goals, so that gets kind of into like the next area. We want to understand what are they trying to achieve from the perspective of the benefits. So they're doing this initiative. There's clearly something they want to improve or become in compliance with, whatever that is. So understanding what those benefits are, it can be something as simple as we're in compliance with the new regulations that are coming along so we don't get fined. Totally legitimate motivator from that perspective. But it could be other things that become a little bit harder to measure. We want to become more competitive. We want to be able to act faster. There's all these different things that they can come up with. And getting into understanding what makes up those elements. Because, okay, this is your proof. This is what you need to prove. These are the things you expect to get better. These are the gains you expect to see. Okay, how are you defining those? What does that mean to you? How do you collect that information? And as you start going in there, you'll find in some cases it's particularly important when the thing that they're trying to do or the goal that they have is something that's not easily quantified. And it often is your responsibility to help walk them through a conversation where that becomes articulated in a way that you will know if you've actually attained it by understanding the metrics they're looking at, the outcomes that they're looking to do. And to your point about fear and concerns, understanding what they're trying to achieve is important, but also at that time, understanding what's the consequence for not getting there? What will happen? What will happen to the company? What will happen to the department? What will happen to you personally? Those are very real drivers that may or may not have been considered by the people that are participating in the project at that time, but are absolutely relevant to buying decisions, timing, compelling events, and also the driver for really leading and spurring that project on to completion. So it's a completely legitimate thing to come up with.
Yeah, and I find also that helping them kind of identify goals, metrics, very specific things that they want to move the needle on kind of takes a little bit of the boogeyman out of these big fear things that they
Right,
have, right? It
right.
helps like just put it down, quantify it. It's like, okay, so here's where we are, here's where we need to go, and here's our plan to get there, right? And when you start doing that, it becomes much more tangible and attainable in their minds, right? And I think that's part of our job as well. So we've talked about kind of understanding the overall initiative, identifying the pain points, and then also defining the expected benefits and ROI and metrics they're going to improve from this. And then what's the fourth thing then?
Well, these become the foundation for you building the narrative, the proof that you will use to make the buy decision compelling for your solution, but also the way that they're going to articulate what they see in your solution, either through the selling process or if there's going to be a proving action like a proof of concept or a trial or something like that, how they will internally communicate what your solution is bringing to the conversation so that they can articulate how it's going to help, how it's going to get to the goal that they want to have, how it's going to succeed with the initiative, and how it will deliver the expected benefits and return on investment, as well as how it will mitigate the risks that you've helped them uncover. And that journey of walking them through that is necessitated or predicated on being able to articulate all those different things, both you as a seller and them as the internal sponsors of the project.
Yeah, so I mean, there's obviously a lot that you can cover here. In fact, we have a whole chapter, several chapters, about 10 or 12, on getting to all these points in detail and examples, etc. And keep in mind that obviously on the first call, you're not going to get all this information,
No,
right?
no, absolutely not.
But if you go into it knowing, okay, these are kind of the four areas I want to uncover a little bit more because these are going to help me build my business case, you can ask one or two of these, and it's a natural progression and conversation that occurs when you're
Hmm.
getting this, right? But when you after you get, let's say, these a few of these nuggets out after the discovery call, do you actually go and kind of start kind of outlining or creating an actual business case that you come back to them with, or what does that process look like? What do you do with this information after that discovery call?
Well, you absolutely start acting on it right away. So first of all, it becomes the framework for every conversation that you as the seller are going to have with them going forward.
Mhm.
And as we were mentioning earlier on, it's not just important to keep everything organized for the people that are participating, but there are always people outside of the ones you're engaging with that are either going to be coming into the project late or the people that you're engaging with need to report to. So your ability to concisely explain how your solution addresses and satisfies the needs of this initiative are the how they will be able to articulate it internally and drum up internal support and making sure budgets are protected and so on and so forth. So that framework of conversation is critically important. Now, over the course of your time talking with them, you're going to ask additional questions. So you should be constantly adding to your understanding and the depth of your ability to speak to that business case. And there's going to be times where new elements are going to come up, or you may be made aware of information that sounds contradictory to things that you've heard of before. So that's where the art form of being able to continually have that conversation with the customer and be refreshing that business case so it's always reflecting the truest form of what they need, why they need it, and what they're trying to do is so critical.
Yeah, I think I like actually writing up, a paragraph or two from this about their business case, right?
Hmm.
And presenting it back to them because it does a couple things. One, it makes sure we're clear in what we're talking about, and there weren't any mistakes, and they can have opportunity to, to amend it or alter it somehow, or
Hmm.
maybe there's nuances in there that aren't covered. So it's a great starting point. But for them, it's also a deliverable that's going to be of value to them, right? Because they're going to need to have this document or this information to take up the chain or across the organization or wherever they need to go to validate this. And so the fact that we work with them on creating this document, it solves two problems really. One, it kind of organizes all the thoughts into a common solution that everyone is aligned with going
Hmm.
forward. And then two, it helps you continue to peel back the onion and get deeper and deeper into what these things mean and other things that were there. And it doesn't feel like an interrogation because now you're both contributing to this document,
Exactly.
right? So
Yeah.
you can use it to dive deeper into things, and they feel like they're getting something out of it because they actually have a living document that they can then go forward with.
Yeah. And that can be as simple as when you've started out a presentation. Here's what we've heard. Here's what we know. There's tactics that work very much along that line. So it puts it right out there, right at the beginning of the meeting or the connection point. And if there's any misunderstandings or anything that's been updated, it's a great time to get that cleared up. But also, because you're constantly having to probe and explore, if you're doing a presentation or if you're doing a demonstration of the solution, you can drill into areas of need and areas of proof that they are expecting to get out of the engagement with you and use that to have a conversation as you're showing something. And then you're kind of like, here's how we would do this and how it would move that and how it would improve this thing over here and address this problem. How do and then as you start to explore that more with them, you can be asking questions and they're engaged in understanding. So it doesn't feel like they're being interrogated. It feels more like they're being asked to, make sure they understand, is this spot on? Because you're giving them something back in exchange for that as you're getting deeper information and refining your understanding. you're giving them talking points and you're giving them things that they can utilize to both either, it could be something as personal as just reducing their own sense of fear and risk, all the way up to giving them the talking points they need to walk into the executive board and be able to articulate exactly how the project is going.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point too that we should bring up, and it's probably could be another complete podcast by itself. But the importance of give and take during a sales cycle. You give, because we've been in many sales cycles where it's just they're demanding and you're constantly giving, and they're not giving anything back, right? And I don't
Mhm.
think I don't think that sets up a healthy dynamic for really a
Yeah,
successful campaign, right?
right.
So this is a way of establishing credibility and value as you're giving them something, but then you're also asking for things back, more information, etc. But they're more apt to do it because they see what the benefit of their efforts is in this document. So it's really a good place to start because so many times there's so many questions you could ask. There's so much information you have. Assimilating it and putting it into a way that helps you move the deal forward is difficult at times because there's
Can
just
be.
so
Yeah.
much that's out
Yeah.
there. So I think starting with the business case is great. I did want to talk a little bit about just a few of the other things that we apply in terms of things you need to identify along the way. And we
Mhm.
have a list of five, which I think are pretty easy. And we leverage these on all aspects of our methodology. But maybe we just cover those quickly. We just kind of list them and just talk a little bit about them. I don't think we have to go into a whole lot of detail right
Right.
now.
But to your point, these kind of five things, they're pretty broad headings. And in the book, we get into more of the nuance and the specification and variances around each one. But you need to be able to understand what the goal is. What's the intent of this project they have going on? Again, it could be something super simple. It could be something fairly complex, or it could be something that's muddled. And you need to help them put a sharper edge to defining what that is so that they can be more successful with that going forward. You need to understand the driver. Why are you doing this? Is it a fear-based or a risk-based type of motivation because of external pressures, or is it internal need and desire to get more benefits? Which closely aligned with that is understanding who actually owns the different needs. It could be something that's global and universal across the whole organization, or it could be specific and germane to just very specific levels of the organization or departments or functional areas inside of it. So you need to understand who owns those, because those are the people that you need to prove you're moving the needle for. That's especially important if they're not involved in the conversation.
Yeah, because so many times, there's been where you think you know the players and who's responsible, but if you had asked it a little bit more, you find out this is a completely other group,
Yeah.
IT, legal, whomever, market, that has a stake in this and also a
Mhm.
say in what occurs that you were not even anticipating. So, yeah, the ownership I find is really key as well.
Yeah, it's also important when, as you're having, as I said before, the discovery process should be as much about the customer learning about their goals, their risks, their capability and ability to act, as it is for you to understand it as well. So along the way, you may uncover new needs, new problems, new threats to the business that are outside of the body of the people that you're presently talking to. And there are times when now reaching outside to that organization can be a very valuable strategy that you can recommend to the person you're selling to if they need to do things like get additional support or get additional budget or get just understanding the potential approval paths that they need to go through. So it's really critical to understand who owns what with those problems, especially as new things come online. You'll often find those when you start finding the next element of this, which is what are the metrics that need to be moved?
Hmm.
How will you prove this? And you need to be able to articulate that into measurable elements and into absolute terms. There's always a tendency to remain qualitative rather than quantitative in the human species. Well, it needs to get better. Okay, well, what does better mean? What elements of your business, measured by what, need to move in what increment to go and say that's better? and walking them through that is critically important. So that's the other thing that you expect to have in the business case when you
And the
come out of
final
that.
one is
Oh yeah, timeline.
time.
Can they execute it? And this is where, I almost interrupted you when you said for opportunity, can they act, right? It's important to understand how they will act on
Mhm.
it to determine that they can or cannot, because often the organization just thinks they can do it. And it isn't until you understand how that process is going to work, what are the workflows engaged, that you begin to identify gaps that the customer themselves may not be aware of. So being able to work on that timeline and establish that with them and help set a more realistic expectation for, like, hey, you said you needed to increase your revenue by 25%. Well, you're setting up a 2-month window to prove that. How realistic is it that you're going to be able to get that number in that short time frame? So you can either to help them change the way they're going to do that calculation, set a more realistic timeline, or use that as a motivation to make them act quicker or stick to a decision timeline that they want to make. So it's
Yeah.
critical on so many different levels.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of using agreed upon timelines, not your self-imposed timeline, right? But
Yes.
agreed upon timelines just kind of light a fire under people because again, these cycles can take months with
Mm-hmm.
different teams, then people go off on vacation, and so like just trying to get this all organized is also a key element. In fact, we have several chapters in the book just about timing alone and identifying
Mm,
those types of things as well.
totally.
So, well, I think that's a good start for just kind of introducing this. But I think, when you start with a motive, building that business case and understanding those things is really a great place to start establishing your beachhead in terms of your foundation of what you're doing, covering, as well as how you're articulating this back to your customer. So we'll go into other details of this in future podcasts. And we're also going to be bringing in other sales leaders, sellers, executives to talk about the things that they care about as well. And we'll be applying these things. I'm really looking forward to that coming
Me
into
too.
the new year here. I thought before we go, I did want to leave with a story because I do like telling stories. So it's our story time section right now. The one that I'm going to talk about was, again, earlier a couple years into my sales career, but we had this huge meeting. It was the final meeting with the executives it was Barclays Global Investors.
Yeah.
For us at that time, that was a huge name, right? We were a small startup software company. We were starting to get some traction with things, but to get a client like Barclays would be a huge feather in our cap. And we had worked this deal really hard. We had found out that a competitor had a little inroad there.
Yeah.
We jumped in there, we got in, and we expanded it from like this little departmental thing to organizational, right? So
Hey.
this was a seven-figure deal, right? That was happening. So it was big. Our CEO was there, our CTO was there, the salesperson, obviously one of the sales leaders, and myself.
Yeah.
5 of us to do this demo. And beforehand, we're around this round table. We got our laptops there, and we're just like, making sure everything's right before the executives came in to the boardroom. It was like the boardroom on the top floor kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
So stakes were high. We were a little bit nervous. We've done this before. But as it's going, people are like handing water back and forth. And in the middle of it, 2 hands collide, and the water, big glass of water, goes over right on the CEO's laptop. And we grab it, we try to grab it and shake the water off, but it's like the screen just goes, and the whole thing just dies. And we're just looking at this like, oh my God. And we realized that we did not have another copy of the presentation that he was going to give. And so we're frantically trying to call headquarters and to see if they can get it over. But this is way back in the early 2000s before a lot of this was not a lot of stuff was online and things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And the end result is we couldn't get it working. But their CEO, God bless him, delivered an amazing presentation. And it was because he really understood the business drivers of why this was important. So he didn't need the slides and things like that. And it was actually turned into a much more compelling presentation for that part of it. Because I had a demo I was going to do, but my laptop was okay, fortunately. But, it speaks to just really knowing the customer's business and what they want to do and why this is an important driver and why they should invest 7 figures in the solution where previously they
Right.
hadn't determined it was an issue. Anyway, if you're talking about pitfalls and things that are going to happen, we've had them all, right? To laptops dying, to things falling out of cars, to all sorts of things that can go wrong. But in this case, this is one that it turned out well. In fact, I think I won the award for the deal of the year along with the seller for this particular one because one, we had got it from a competitor, we'd stolen it from a competitor, and also it was one of our largest, if not the largest deal to date, I think, that we had at that point. So anyway, if you ever encounter difficulties in selling, which I'm sure you're going to encounter a bunch, I just want to make it clear that you can overcome a lot if you really understand and have a good relationship with your prospect and are delivering value to them.
So important to understand that. And cap doff of the golf cap to the CEO for being not only aware of the value of the solution, but being properly prepared to map that to what you guys had prepared them with relative to the needs of this particular customer. Because that's the story. And you can tell that story in an elevator, which I can actually talk about next time. So.
All right, that sounds great. Well, on that note, let's wrap it up for this week. Thanks so much for listening. Hopefully you found that valuable, and we can continue to provide you little nuggets and useful things every week. My goal, I think our goal here is really to make sure that you get something that you can either think about or apply immediately in your sales cycles. And it might be just one little thing that you think differently of. But if you can do that, I feel that we've been successful. So thanks for tuning in. And we can end with the disclaimers, or we can just...
Well, before we go, folks, if you enjoyed the show, and we certainly hope you did, please like and subscribe if that's appropriate for the vehicle that you're watching us on. So please do so that you can come back here the next time we have another show. And if there's a topic you'd like to hear us talking about, if there's things you'd like us to emphasize or things you are saying, hey, maybe bring this into the show because I'd love to know more about this, please give us feedback. Either leave a comment in the channel that you're watching on or go to our website and give us your feedback. We will be more than happy to cover those. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Software Sales Simplified, Move to Success. This podcast is produced by and is the sole property of Strategic Sales Optimization, LLC, copyright 2025. Reproduction or use of any part of this broadcast in whole or in part without the express written permission of Strategic Sales, LLC is strictly prohibitive. All rights reserved.
Right. Thanks so much, guys. We'll talk to you next week.
Take care. Be well.